Hello and welcome to a sofa chat with the wonderful Michael Mahoney. Michael and I are both hypnotherapists, and Michael's been doing it so much longer than me. So I always like to meet up with people who know what they're talking about, who've got massive amounts of experience with a whole range of different client groups. And Michael's been instrumental in bringing hypnotherapy to, I guess, thousands of people, Michael, one way or another. Not only as a therapist, but also as a trainer. And he talks about things that are very close to my heart. So I thought it'd be really good to invite him along and get him to talk to you about hypnotherapy. And he has a very specific thing that he works with, and that is IBS. So I'm hoping that Michael will share quite a lot more about IBS then, because I think a lot of people have got problems. So it will be interesting to see if you can pick up some tips and tricks in this sofa chat with Michael. So looking forward to this session, Michael. I'm really grateful that you're here, and I'm hoping to learn a great deal from you today. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Susie. Thank you for inviting me on. It's a pleasure. Thank you. Well, IBS, three little initials, irritable bowel syndrome. My journey with IBS as a therapist started on the 13th of March, 1991. I have a medical practice, a practice based in a medical centre. And for 25 or 27 years in my practice, I was based with GPs. And one particular day, this 13th of March, 1991, a Wednesday, if memory serves me right, I had 12 clients that day. And 3 of them actually made an impression on my life that changed the direction of my life and of my practice as well. And both of them, or 3 of them, sorry, presented with IBS. And at that time, I didn't really know what it was. I know it was something to do with the stomach, and I knew it wasn't particularly good. But each of those individuals left my room weeping. And they had been through various tests, intrusive tests, and nothing had helped. Medication, the effectiveness of the medications that they'd tried and been prescribed was wearing off, and basically they were beside themselves. And I went into practice to help, and it cut me deeply that I couldn't in this instance. So what I did was I promised these 3 individuals that I would look into it and get back to them. And all of them basically looked at me with a resigned, well, thank you. Mm-hmm. And that started a journey for me that took me into researching IBS, what it is and what it isn't. And basically what it is, it's a very common digestive disorder, which affects generally about 15% of the population. They, being the medical profession, don't know really particularly why it starts, who should get it. Women present twice as much as men. Now, whether that's a social thing, nobody really knows. But the bottom line is, if you pardon the pun, the medical profession can do very little. And they hold the hands up, and GPs that I've worked with and consultants that have sent patients to me, they all generally admit that they don't really know what to do, because they don't know what starts it. They don't know what to do with it, but science is moving on. Mm. But from 1991, I've seen thousands and thousands of individuals, and my IBS program has been used by hundreds of thousands. There are still more people with IBS in the world today than there was when I started. And I've trained hundreds and hundreds of hypnotherapists to help clients to deal with this. So a really long story short, from the 13th of March 1991, I really researched and developed a protocol for IBS. I contacted the individuals back from March 91 and asked if they would be guinea pigs. And they were so pleased. And what we found was that even with intractable IBS, that's really difficult for the medical profession to do really very much with. These people had been through all the tests and all the things that the medical profession could offer. And they actually reported reductions in symptomology and frequency of presentation of IBS of around about 85%.
Wow.
And, you know, this is, it was mind-blowing, really. But to get to that stage, it took me a few years. But then I did some more research, I did some more patient piloting, I asked for feedback, and GPs were sending patients to me. And generally, we did pretty well. And what we found is that the 85% went up to 87 and a bit percent, which is, when you think, really, really sort of a massive difference. So what I then did, my next job, was to get what I'd learned and put it down on audio tape, and it was audio tape in those days. And to get everything I needed onto audio tape, it generally took me 5 years of research and 3 years of patient piloting. So I know that it was going to help people even that couldn't get to my practice, who were not well enough to get to my practice, or people that lived abroad. And that was when, in 1998, the IBS Audio Program 100 was released into the world. My little baby was released. But to get an idea of how IBS affects people, it doesn't just affect the individual, it affects families and partners, because, you know, holidays have to be cancelled, days out and trips out, and people wake up in the morning with IBS, and the first thing they wonder is, what clothes am I going to wear? What happens if I get stuck in a traffic jam? Because the symptoms of IBS there are generally 4 variants. One is diarrhea predominant, one's constipation, one's an alternation between the two, and one's pain predominant. But there isn't an atypical patient. So somebody that presents with diarrhea, they might have diarrhea and pain and sickness, whereas somebody else might have diarrhea and pain. They might not have the sickness, they might have excessive wind. So there are subvariants of IBS. So it's really quite a complex condition. So the IBS Audio Program came out into the world, but to judge the severity and how people view it that are living with this, because things like the sex life is non-existent very often, confidence and self-esteem goes down, memory and recall and attention span, and all those things happen because what's happening, we work with energy. And if we imagine we have an emotional pot of energy, and what we do is we start, as soon as we have a thought, we know every thought creates a physical response. So what we then do is we have a thought, and this is even while we're lying in bed for the IBS patient. Right, I've got to go on the motorway. So what happens if I get diarrhea when I'm on the motorway? What's going to happen then? What's going to happen if I'm a teacher in class and I've got 35 children in front of me, or I'm a policeman on the beat, or I'm a fireman on duty? So what happens then is we create that thought, and every thought creates a physical response. So this is like a row of dominoes. And what we do is we have a thought, and then and there's the response. So just thinking about how our tummy might be for an IBS patient, or somebody that's anxious or stressed or whatever it is, every thought creates the physical response. So then we don't like the idea then that I'm getting out of bed, I'm not out of bed yet, but my tummy is starting to wobble and I'm going to go on the motorway. So we create the thoughts by taking energy out of this emotional pot. But then because we don't like what we're doing, we take more energy out and try and suppress what we've just created. So we double dip before we even get out of bed. So very quickly, the energy levels start to go down. And when the energy levels go down, the mind and body connection kicks in. And basically then we have a battery pack. And this battery pack of emotion is there to help us when our core pot of energy goes down. So then the subconscious looks what's going on, and it takes energy from this battery pack, and then puts it into the core energy, and we start to feel a bit better again. But the subconscious knows that our core pots of energy are going down quite significantly. And then we worry, we concern, and just because we have IBS or anxiety or whatever else we're working with, life doesn't stop. We still have to go to work, we still have responsibility and relationships and finances and all the rest of the things we have to work with. So quite quickly, particularly over a period of time, if there's anything ongoing for any length of time, then what we find is that energy goes again. So the mind and the body connection kicks in. Look, your core pot of energy is gone, your battery pack's gone. So then you go to this emotional reserve. And this is the bit where you think to yourself, oh, for goodness sake, this can't last forever. So we get quite brave and stoic and resolute and bloody minded and all the rest. We plod on. But that's it then. Your energy's gone. And for a lot of people, IBS, anxiety, stress, whatever it might be, our sleeping pattern isn't as good as it should be. And when that happens, we're not able to recharge and make sure our energy levels are right for the next day. So there's a ever-decreasing spiral that we're going to. But a point that I wanted to make was that from a medical viewpoint, this is a non-serious condition. You're not going to die from it, as far as they know. But from the other side of the table, where the patient is, the University of North Carolina, they did a study back in 2009, I think, perhaps a little bit later, but around about that time. And what they did is they actually asked IBS sufferers, and there was over 1,900 of them that were in the survey, and they said, if we could give you a treatment so that you'd become symptom-free for the rest of your life, how much of your life would you give up for it? And people that had IBS basically answered they would give up 25% of their expected lifespan, which averaged out at 15 years, if they could be symptom-free from IBS. So when you think of that figure, somebody is willing to give up 15 years of life if they can have a symptom-free life from IBS.
So that really is about quality of life, isn't it? And I think we all want a quality life. Whatever our ability, disability, we are looking for quality. So that sort of indicates that that's absolutely true. We've seen a shorter life that's quality than a longer life without it.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. And 14% of those 1,990 people, 14% of them said they would undergo treatment if there was a risk of up to 1 in 1,000 chance of death. So this is from a really respected research organization in America. So it gives some idea of the depth of feeling that goes. So it isn't just the physical aspects of IBS, it's actually the emotional things as well. And as therapists, that's what we've got to deal with. We've got to deal with both the physical and the emotional to actually get the end result. And, the great thing, and it is a great thing, is that hypnotherapy has a track record going back to the mid-80s of being able to help IBS sufferers in a variety of ways. And the process or the protocol that I use helps people to not only to reduce the symptoms physically, but also the emotional aspects as well. And you can't really put a price on it. You know, my program is £52, but it's actually priceless to those that have used it. And they've said, well, why didn't I use it years and years and years ago? And this is the protocol, though, I teach in my masterclass for hypnotherapists who want to have an impact in this particular patient population. And it's a growing patient population, sadly. But my practice has been based on literally from seeing those first 3 people was my practice was based on it. And the great thing is that although I specialize in IBS and gut disorders, I still do other things. I've researched and developed other programs. And if a therapist actually does that, then what they do is they create various revenue streams. And we've found, you know, certainly since I started practice in 1986, which was there was a recession in that time. So what we need to do, I think, as therapists, is to make sure that we can have different revenue streams so that when people can't come to us, like they couldn't do in the pandemic, that our practices don't die. And I've known a lot of practices that have died.
Yeah, and I think not everybody wants to be an online patient, do they?
No, not at all.
But,
no.
Yeah, I mostly work online because I work across continents, if you like, and I rarely see people in the house or at all, and it works very effectively. I know people are anxious about it, but there's no reason to be. And I think a lot of therapists were anxious about it, weren't they, with the pandemic, about working, you know, how are they going to be able to help the person regulate themselves and be safe, etc. But it actually is quite impactful and effective. And you can still be there in your pajamas, you know, you can go straight back to bed and lie down if you need to, you know, so yeah. Anyway, carry on, sorry.
No, that's fine. It's just, but I think we have to meet expectations, don't we?
We do.
And the vast majority of people that come to us, they don't come to us just because, you know, Susie Jones is a nice person or Mahoney isn't a bad chap. Basically, they become because they're looking for help, and very often they'll have been to various other places before they get to us. So I think there's building rapport is important, and we can do it over the internet. It isn't a big shake. And I created a little formula, and the little formula is CP is D over E. So CP is client perspective, is D over E, which is delivery over expectation. So your customer perception is delivery over expectation. So if you don't meet that expectation, it doesn't matter how good you are as a therapist, you've failed in the patient's eyes. So I remind myself quite often of that little formula. You know, there is an expectation we've got to deliver, but also we've got to get the client to deliver and to be in the right place for them to achieve. And very often I find that because people have been on such a long journey, if I'm stay with IBS patients at the minute, that their energy levels are so low, they don't have the energy to get better. Now, if you think of that, you don't have the energy to get better. So what we have to do, the first thing I believe that we have to do is to put a stake in the ground. And the stake in the ground is basically getting the client to a point where they realize that this is as bad as it gets. And what that does, it helps us to set a point that we can reference. We have a reference point. And I always put my clients on a scale from 0 to 10. And 0's naff when we first meet, and 10's tickety-boo. 10's where they want to get to. But as a therapist and a client working together, we're effectively like mountaineers. We're going up a hill, and I'm at the front, and we're roped together, and I'm pulling them up to start. But as they grow and their strength increases and their energy in their pot increases and improves, and their expectation starts to be met, then they relax and they become more compliant with what we were asking them to do. So eventually we start walking together on the journey. And then a little bit later, they start to move ahead. And at that stage, that's when they outgrow us as a therapist, because they're actually able to do now what they want to do themselves. So one of the best things somebody can say to me is, Mike, I don't need you anymore. Oh, fabulous words.
In all of my life, I've loved to make myself redundant. You know, with any job that I was doing, put the tools in, build the resilience and the sustainability, and then adios, it's time for me to go. So it's the same model in business as it is in therapy, really. We don't want our clients with us for years. We want them to be sorted as quickly as possible, but sustainably.
Yes,
and
indeed.
I think that is the issue around expectation of the patient, isn't it? You know, the client, sorry, healthcare background patient. Forgive me.
Oh, I call them patients if they're referred from a consultant or a GP.
Absolutely. So are you willing to give up that which made you sick is probably the thing I say the most. Are you willing to give it up? If we discover that coffee is your nemesis, for example, then are you willing to give it up in order that you can have health? And I think that's really interesting, because these people were willing to give up 15 years of their life. They were willing to risk death for it. They were prime expectation. I want this. And I think we have to want change, not because somebody tells us what we're thinking is wrong, but because we want it. We want a different life. We want not to be anxious about driving on the motorway because the toilet might require our attention or whatever it is. And if we're not there, you know, I don't think there's any point in speaking to people. I mean, I really don't. And the only thing I do with people who aren't there is build resilience, which is lovely. I like your analogy of the energy part, because in a sense, they're not ready. So when you build resilience, you're filling them with energy and helping them to know how not to deplete themselves. And this is a really good message for me, because I'm post-surgery and recovery. And, you know, I struggle with some aspects of it and my energy pot gets depleted. So, you know, I might not need hypnotherapy because I'm actually in a physiological recovery, but psychologically, that's when, you know, that impacts your recovery. So whatever your needs are, this is a really good analogy for how are you depleting yourself? Are you, and therefore what the alternative is how are you filling yourself? So what recommendation would you give to somebody to fill their energy pot?
Simply to recognize that there's a work-life balance, and there are equations in life, and one equation is if you say yes to one thing, you say no to something else. So you've said yes to me today and I'm grateful for it, but you've also said no to something else. You could be writing another book or something, but for now you've said yes to me and I'm grateful. So we have this yes or no. And when we're at a stage where our energy levels are low, we just need to say yes where we want it to fit and not where we want other people expect it to fit. So we have to say yes to ourselves and say no to something else. And that, you know, people will then throw back and say, but that's selfish. But no, it isn't selfish. That's self-preservation, because you're in a place where you don't have the energy. And another equation that I usually throw at resistant clients initially is, you know, I've been blessed with 3 children, and each of my children on their 18th birthday, I've sat down with them and I've said, up to this moment in time, I have been responsible for you. Now you're responsible for what you do. Yes, I know, Dad, because I've brought my children up right. Yes, they know that they're responsible, but because it's an equation, there's a flip side. And I have to point out to them, but not only do you take responsibility for what you choose to do, you also take responsibility for what you choose not to do. And if you choose not to do something and it's having a detrimental effect on you, or the ramifications are going to be somewhat uncomfortable down the line, you can't blame anybody else but yourself. And that's the one that motivates people, because nobody wants to be blamed for something. So until they actually know that that side of the equation exists, it's more difficult. But once they know that part of the equation exists, it really motivates.
Absolutely. And so, I mean, in terms of, people go on a lot about imposter syndrome, don't they? It's one of my words that I don't like. Personally, I don't really get it. But so how does that translate to imposter syndrome? Because I know that it's a real thing. I just don't get it. So what do you recommend with people who need to get that balance in order that they aren't feeling like imposters?
Well, my take on imposter syndrome is that largely it's false, because very often it's people that are well-trained, well-educated, that might have had to work their way up the ladder to wherever they are, and that they might see people that are better educated than them, or people that speak better than them, or however, whatever litmus tests they put in, whatever measuring sticks. But the reality is, if we're actually in a position of authority, or we are certainly in an authority of our own life, we have a right to be who we are meant to be. And I'm meant to be a hypnotherapist, and I was brought up on a council estate, and that doesn't matter one bit. It did in the early days, because in my school years, it was, you're never going to amount to anything, Mahoney. And it depends what you've been told from an early age as well. Will you ever achieve anything? You won't ever do this, you won't ever do that. So I think all we can do is measure ourselves to how we were the day before. So not measure ourselves against any other people, because we're all different. There'll always be greater and lesser than ourselves, as the poem Desiderata says, if you're familiar with that. But what we have to do is say, well, look, I've worked hard. I've got a right to be where I am, and I can do what I want to do. I can do my job properly. I can achieve results properly. I've got a right to put my head up and say, I am me. So why should you feel that you're an imposter, when in reality is you're unique, and I'm unique, and Susie's unique. So if we're unique, then that means that we're a one-off. And if we're a one-off, it means we can't compare ourselves to anybody else.
No.
So it's a lost argument.
And I think this is where I come in as well, really. But people genuinely believe this about themselves. So it's like, how do we help people move beyond that knowledge that they are? And I think, yes, I'm unique, and yes, I'm excellent at what I do, but I could be better. Well, of course I could be better. So what do you need? If you're not satisfied with who you are, you need more resources, don't you? Because
You do.
And that's all.
Go
and find some new resources. So
go and grow.
And I think it is we've talked about expectations, and that is the key that kills relationships. If the expectations are unrealistic, it can kill our self-esteem if we're expecting to be Picasso the first time we pick up a paintbrush, and we need to just be who we are and accept who we are and build on that. I always say rock your weirdness, and I do, always have, and I think it's really important. But as a businesswoman, I wanted to employ people that knew a lot more than me.
Yeah,
And I
always.
think, and because, I was doing my job, but I couldn't employ people that were like me. I wanted people that were different than me. I want people that would challenge me, that knew more than me, because that's how you move forward. And, and anything outside of that business model as an employer is going to lead you down a very dark path, because you're going to be constantly stressed out and be having to be the best at everything. And we can't be. So, if you feel like an imposter, and we've all experienced it to some degree, then it's fine. Just go and be who you are. And if you're in the wrong place, get out. That's always my advice.
Right.
Create a safe and sustainable pathway out of where you are. And that, as therapists, is what we do for people, isn't it? Is support them and facilitate that path of transformation. I
I think
think
we have to give them.
we
Sorry.
yeah, no, I think we could talk for hours, couldn't we?
Good. I think part of our job is really to find the pathway for them, and sometimes perhaps just elevate them above the circumstance,
Yes.
to get them out of the mire of all the things that's going on. Just elevate them up and say, well, this is the path. Consider. But I don't think as therapists, it's very rare I ever tell anybody what to do. I think my job as a therapist is to give people's options of choice, considerations, and difficult questions sometimes. And I think that's part of my job, so they can find their own answers. But every now and again, you'll get somebody and you'll think, oh, for goodness sake, just see it. And if they can't, then we have to help them then.
Yeah.
But it's a consideration and an option of choice. Think of this or that. Because I think if we go telling people what to do, then basically they can come back. They don't take responsibility for it quite as much. And then we're in the firing line if they stumble when they go down the path that we're suggesting that they go down.
Absolutely.
So,
and I don't even know where I heard this, but I've used it a lot since I did. So whoever said it, please say thank you. Okay. And that is, don't steal people's learning experience from them by telling them what to do and how to live and what they're doing wrong. We all need to learn. And as children, we're told what to do. And this is why that great sort of conversation you had with an 18-year-old, which I doubt is actually anywhere near adult, but it was 21 in our day, wasn't it? But I don't think we were that adult then. But I was running a ward, I was a qualified nurse and doing everything I needed to do. So, we do have capacity, but to actually really support people to be adult and grown up, we need to give people that chance to learn by their own mistakes. And that's how I learned most of what I know, is by mistakes. So, yeah. Michael, you talked about a program, an IBS program, and the fact it's a growing industry with all the stresses and strains and pressures people are under. I'm sure that it's contributing greatly to the IBS numbers of diagnosis. You talked about a program. Is this something that's available now? Is it an online, or is it a course, or tell us a bit about it?
The IBS Audio Program 100
Mm.
is a suite of recordings, audio recordings, that are listened to in a particular structure over 100 days, hence the 100.
Right. Okay.
But within the 100 days, there are quite a number of days off as well, because as we learn, of course, then it's like the old way of when you used to study for exams, you didn't listen the day before, you didn't do any work before the day before or the night before, you just let it all sink in. So there's a structure to the program, and the program was released in 1998, and it's still going strong. It was the first home use program available. Started off on audio tape, but now it's available on MP3 download, immediate streamed or daily streamed for those that aren't particularly comfortable with downloading things or putting things into iCloud. And so the streamed versions and MP3 download versions. And what I tried to do, and this program now goes to 46 countries, and it's in 3 languages. So we've done something right, and it's proved it's earned its stripes, is what we used to say years ago. And what I wanted to do was to convey on recording what I was doing with my clients. And the first thing was to stop the slide. So the first session would effectively put a stake in the ground and say, this is as bad as it gets. This is where the energy levels start to be building up again. Because what we need to do is we need to get that energy and put the energy into recovery, some of it anyway. And so the first session does that, and then it goes through. There are 5 sessions, an introduction of 5 sessions, and what that does is take people from putting the stake in the ground right the way through to being much better after listening. But what they've done is they've worked for it. They have to listen to it as it's structured, and because we learn in a particular way. The first recording is the introduction. The second deals with the upper GI tract. The next session deals with the lower digestive tract. The next session is teaching people how to speed up or slow down the digestive system. And that's basically what's happening if somebody's got diarrhea or constipation. Their digestive system it's either going too fast or it's going too slow. And the easiest way, I guess, for people to understand is that when we first start to thinking about change, we've got to recognize that change comes from us, but we've got to be taught how to do it. So the easiest way is to think about the digestive system as a wave that goes down a caterpillar's body. If you just say to somebody, I'll help you just speed up or slow down your digestive system, well, don't know how that's going to happen. So you tell them. So it's like this little wave that goes down a caterpillar's body. And that's basically how your digestive system works with your peristalsis, your motility. And when I did a research project, and it was paid for by a GP practice, an NHS practice, and I had 20 intractable IBS patients that were sent to me by doctors from that particular practice. And one lady there, she loved the idea of this caterpillar, and she called it Linford. And she had constipation. So she learned how to speed up the digestive system, and Linford was doing the job. You know, Linford, the Linford Christie. Yeah. And she actually almost personified this digestive movement, and it was great how she adapted to it. But she owned it. And when she owned it, you know, it was just amazing to see. And a few years later, just to stay with this lady, I was going through town. I heard this cooey, Mr. Mahoney, right across the pedestrian area of town. And it was this lady, and she was stood on the steps of the bank. So I went over and had a chat. She says, "Do you remember me?" I said, "I do." And then she said, "Have a look in there." And she opened a bag, and there was some milk and oranges and a couple of potatoes or whatever it was. I said, "What am I looking for?" And she said, "I thought you remembered me." I said, "I do." And what she did when I first met her, she showed me all the paraphernalia that she had. She had a wet flannel, she had a towel, some spare nicks, some spare stockings. And there's all this paraphernalia, because she never knew when she'd need the loo. And she loves me to death, and she tells me if ever I'm down the top of her street to go and call in for a cup of tea and a biscuit. But if you can empower somebody to do that, and that's what the IBS program does, it empowers them to take responsibility and to learn how the mind and body connection works. And as therapists, we actually know this, and we see it masses of times in our lives, but people don't really recognize it. There's a thought and there's a response.
So they can get this online through your website, or how?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry.
All the links will be below here. So a little bit more about Michael and his links. So, and you can always ask questions here. So if you aren't clear about what to do. And then you talked about, I don't know if it was on here or if it was the chat that we had before, about a masterclass. Now, is this for hypnotherapists and other therapists?
Yeah, it's just for hypnotherapists, really. I understand hypnotherapy. I don't understand a lot of other therapists. But for hypnotherapists who really want to understand the IBS condition, and from everything from meeting your first client to structuring the sessions with the client, to referring to doctors, writing back to doctors who have referred to you. There are scripts. There's lots of information about IBS, about what it is and what it isn't. And we cover things like secondary gains, and we cover the emotional pot of energy in a lot more detail. And generally what it is, it's a full day, and everything that somebody needs is actually there to take back to the practice and to start with the next day.
And is this an in-person event or is this an online event?
At the moment, it's in person.
Right.
It's one-to-one. It's a full day. But I do hope in time to eventually put it down into modules onto the internet. It's quite a big job, so I'm not quite sure when I'll get it finished. But it is something that I am working on at the moment. But the masterclass, the one-to-one masterclass, is available now, and that's something that I've been running since 2000. I used to do them. With quite a lot of attendees, and it was great. And a lot of people walked away with things what they needed. But I had that little niggly doubt that I could only go as fast as the slowest one in the audience.
Yes. Yeah.
So while it's, it cost me a lot of money to make the decision to not do the groups now. But at least I know that everybody is going to get exactly what they need to help their clients. And the great thing is that, I've been working with IBS clients now for 26 years. And in recession, during the pandemic, it was there, the business was there. So I made a decision to specialize in IBS, but also to diversify, which sounds like a contradiction of terms, but when it comes to revenue streams, it isn't. And so everything that somebody needs, they can take back to the practice and use it the next day.
This is marvelous. I'm going to have to call time on this because I think we could, as I say, I think we could be here for the whole of the day, quite honestly, chatting about all sorts of things. So thank you very much, Michael, to you for bringing your knowledge and your skills and your wisdom to this podcast, this sofa chat. And is there anything in your final words you'd like to say to people that are watching in any way?
To therapists, keep doing what you're doing because the world needs you.
Yes. To
IBS patients, whatever you do, do not give up. And if you ever start a sentence with the word can't, end it with the word yet.
Yes. Very good advice. I'm going to write that down in the bottom of the show notes as well. So thank you very much, Michael, and thank you for watching this. Stay tuned, because I will be providing you with a wonderful video that Michael has taken on one of his walkabouts in the North Yorkshire. Is it North Yorkshire, the one you've sent me? Yeah. And a small meditation. So thank you for being here, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you. And as we reflect upon all we've learnt today, all the things about IBS and imposter syndrome, things that might not be your issue, but one thing we can think about is our pot of energy. So join me as you put your feet on the floor and put your hand or hands on your heart. And take this moment to breathe. Breathe through your nose, deep into your belly. Long, beautiful breaths. Focused breaths. And imagine that a stream of golden light is coming through your heart center, where your hand is, and filling that pot with that beautiful golden light, which is energy. And just feel the joy and thrill of your energy returning. And while we're doing that, look for the wisdom that you hold deep within you about what is filling your pot in life and what is depleting your pot in life. And bring that to your attention so that you can find your path to maintaining balance of energy in your pot. Just imagine now that this golden light that's coming through your hand is starting to fill the space all around you, as wide as your arms, as high as the ceiling where you're sitting, and that you are protected in this beautiful golden light. And know you can return here any day, with or without my voice. Be well. Be powerful. And most of all, be grateful.